Muy buenas tardes, estimado público. Les damos la más cordial de las bienvenidas a esta actividad. Antes de comenzar, solicitamos mantener micrófonos y cámaras apagadas, no interrumpir al presentador, al traductor ni al conferencista. Quien incumpla en esto será expulsado de forma inmediata de la sala Zoom. Posterior a la charla magistral, se abrirá una ronda de consultas. Favor utilizar el chat para ir dejando estas, las cuales serán transmitidas en esta instancia al conferencista. También para que a nuestros oyentes desde YouTube estaremos recopilando las consultas que ustedes vayan dejando en el chat. Si desea hacer una consulta oral, pedir de forma educada la palabra, el anfitrión le dará el espacio para abrir vuestro micrófono. Por favor, dar preferencia a estas consultas a aquellos que tengan dominio del inglés. Sin más preámbulos, damos por comenzada la actividad.
Buenas tardes, profesores de América. Estamos desde México por el norte, Colombia, Perú, Bolivia y Argentina con estaciones de repetición directas, ¿ya? Más 32 universidades con sus equipos de docentes y alumnos, que son los que llegaron con sus trabajos. Para esta jornada de la tarde, después de un extenso trabajo de mediodía, donde estuvieron las 4 mesas, ¿ya?, aportando con sus ideas y sus sueños para una docencia mejor desde nuestros talleres. A continuación, dejo con ustedes a Roberto Guerrero Pérez, quien presentará a nuestro invitado de la tarde. Adelante, Roberto.
Hello, Mr. Ching. Welcome. It is a pleasure to have you here with us. Saludamos al profesor Ching y, por supuesto, nuestra bienvenida al cuerpo de académicos y estudiantes. Antes de comenzar, quiero contar una experiencia para que puedan comprender la dimensión humana y sencilla del profesor Ching. Hace 10 años atrás, en Manizales, un 11 del 2010, estaba sentado como cualquier participante en un congreso en la aula mater de Manizales de la Universidad Nacional de Colombia, y al lado mío estaba sentado un señor sencillo, muy humilde, que cuando presentan a la estrella de ese congreso, que era el profesor Ching, se levanta y era quien estaba sentado al lado mío. Eso habla de la sabiduría, de la sencillez y de esa humanidad del profesor Ching. También quiero enfatizar que es primera vez que el profesor Ching dicta una clase magistral en Chile. Lamentamos no tenerlo en forma física en nuestro país y sobre todo en Concepción, para que pueda dibujar los espacios de nuestra ciudad sentado en torno a un árbol, respirar el aire de Concepción, sentir los ruidos de Concepción. Lamentamos también que no podamos tener una relación directa con usted, profesor Ching, nuestros estudiantes que puedan preguntarle directamente. Pero a pesar de eso, tenemos esta condición virtual. Podemos tenerlo nuevamente en forma virtual. Y solamente, profesor Ching, agradecer todos los libros que ha escrito. Aquí tengo uno, no se ve, pero es el Diccionario Visual de la Arquitectura. Espacio y forma de la arquitectura que el profesor Ching ha escrito, que ha sido un libro de cabecera de los estudiantes de arquitectura. Agradecer, y he tenido la fortuna de conocerlo directamente en 2 oportunidades, es que doy la bienvenida, profesor Ching, a esta charla inaugural de vuestra primera visita virtual en Chile.
Lo siento, estaba enmudecido. Muchas gracias, profesor Roberto, por sus palabras. Antes que todo, y decirle a toda la audiencia que nos está escuchando de toda Latinoamérica, que para entrar al canal de la traducción en inglés, porque evidentemente nuestro profesor Ching habla inglés, por ende, para ustedes y la mayoría, y el entendimiento de todos, abajo, al lado que dice Share Screen, luego dice Record, and then Interpretation. En la sección de Interpretation, por favor, hagan clic, que ese es el canal donde todo se va a escuchar en el español, mientras nosotros podamos interactuar con el profesor Ching en inglés. So first of all, I want to greet all the people from all over Latin America that are watching us right now live, from Chile, from Temuco, Chile, from Mexico, Argentina, Brazil. We want to thank you all for being here now. With no further ado, I want to introduce you to an architect that is author of many, many books that all architecture students have read during the time in college. Directly from the United States, here is Frank Ching.
So let me see. Thank you, everyone. It's a privilege and an honor to be able to address you today at this 5th Latin American architecture meeting. It does bring back fond memories of my visit to the first Latin American architecture meeting in Manizales, Colombia, in 2010, 10 years ago. I probably met some of you there who are listening in today as well. And if so, I send my greetings. I don't recall exactly what I presented 10 years ago, and so I might be repeating myself. I hope that's acceptable to you. I found that I'm going to be talking about drawing, and the more I teach drawing, and the more I think about it, I keep resolving it into very simple terms. I hope it's not too simple. My background, obviously, is a visual. I don't want to downplay the other senses that some of the other speakers may be addressing, but I want to acknowledge the fact that a vision or a visual system is not the only sense that we deal with in architecture. But for me, drawing is first of all a language. Just as we learn how to read and write to express our thoughts in words, the designers use drawings to think about, develop, convey ideas in three-dimensional form. Drawing is not just the skill of the hand. It's not just a manual skill. It involves both seeing and thinking. And I want to stress that the thinking part of it is sometimes not so obvious. It's not just the seeing, it's not just a hand, but the role that our thinking processes plays into drawing. And as architects, we deal with constantly with three-dimensional information, and we learn how to represent it on a two-dimensional surface. Even if you're using computer technology, developing models, the monitor or the screen that you're working with is still a two-dimensional surface. It's illusory. Whatever three-dimensional information you see is really just an illusion. And so we have to learn how to develop that ability to portray 3 dimensions on 2-dimensional surfaces. And what you see here are sketches that I did visiting the new territories north of Hong Kong. On the upper left is an analysis of a walled city, and on the right are drawings or diagrams I did in studying the ancestral halls. As you can see, the plans section, 3-dimensional views. So in this case, it's not just the ability to draw, but the ability to think in 3 dimensions. So for me, there are 3 reasons why we draw. The first is that drawing invigorates our seeing, just as seeing enables us to draw. And in this case, I'm talking primarily by drawing by hand on location. Second reason we draw is to stimulate our imagination, especially in the design process. And the third reason is to communicate ideas and information. So when we talk about drawing on location, we typically think of it as perspective views, what I call perceptual views, what we perceive by being in a certain place. This is a view of an area just a few blocks from where I live in Seattle. Notice when we're drawing on location, we're drawing perceptual views. I like to convey not only what I'm looking at, but where I am standing. So the relationship between where I am and what I'm viewing is essential. That's why I included the street signs. Here's another view of the 5 rathas in India, Mamallapuram. And another view of the Ponte Fargipsio in Rome, crossing the River Tiber. These are all drawings done from observation, not from photographs, which is an important point to make. Drawing from a photograph is very much different than drawing what you see before you. And what it does do, it makes you, first of all, stop and notice things that you might not notice as if you're driving by. And this is one area, I think, that even with the digital technologies we have today, this is still a viable alternative to computers. Even when we're visiting places, we can draw conceptual views. You typically think of these views as plans, sections, elevations. This is an example of my visit to Takayama, Japan, visiting the folk houses there. And standing in that and roaming around that structure, I used the upper right-hand section to figure out the structural system, the connections, the proportions of the spaces. So this is entirely in my head, walking around trying to imagine what it would look like in section. Now, we never really see the world in plan or in section. So these are conceptual views that originate in our minds. And our drawing, the ability to draw these is an important skill. Here's another example. On the left is a perceptual view of an approach to the Castel San Angelo in Rome. On the right-hand side, what I was trying to do is figure out the path of movement as you circumnavigate the complex and rise up through those various levels. And so I was trying to use these diagrams to figure the path of movement out. It's a very complex pattern of movement. And so I was trying to figure out how to convey that in a drawing. Here's another example from Mexico City, a convent by Luis Barragan. It's a very tight site, and I was using this transparent overview to try to figure out how the program spaces were organized around the central courtyard. So the drawing itself is not important. It's the thought process that I was going through in trying to figure out the organization. And of course, in the design process itself, we use these kinds of drawings to think about design ideas, work out design problems. And oftentimes these drawings are more diagrams than anything else. They're pictorial in a way, but they're very highly abstract. And that way you can isolate certain issues and ignore others. Of course, working back and forth from plans and sections to three-dimensional views. It's a way of recording your thought process in design. And of course, throughout history, we have seen how drawing is used to communicate ideas and information. On the left, you see a plan of the Greek city of Priene, and on the right, a diagram of an urban space that is defined by and given meaning to by the spaces around it. So in this case, the urban space is very inclusive. Now, if you were to look at the inner sanctuary of the Ise shrine in Japan, we see that the walled enclosure is meant to keep you out. So it's a similar field to space, but in this case, it's very exclusive. That particular structure is rebuilt every 20 years on adjacent sites. This has to do with the Shinto belief in death and renewal. Now, if we look at the two diagrams side by side, very similar fields of space, but one's exclusive, one's inclusive. And I want to highlight the important role diagrams play in the design process. It's our way of thinking about issues in a very abstract way before we flesh out the design ideas. In the following series of slides, I want to highlight the differences between drawing by hand with a pen or pencil on paper and the machine, the digital drawing with computers. On the left is a view that I drew of Via Julia in Rome, pen on paper. On the right is a series of shells that are created by cutting sections through a torus. This is, I created this on a computer to illustrate the structural abilities of shells. Now, as I blow up both the hand drawing and the machine drawing, you begin to see how the hand drawing image is fragmented while the digital drawing remains true. It's a vector image, so no matter how much you enlarge it, it retains its accuracy. And finally, you can see how the hand drawing has devolved into almost unrecognizable imagery. Whereas on the right, you see how the vector image remains true. So this is the magic of a hand drawing. When you look at the original image, you can see what it is, but when you blow it up, you see it doesn't really replicate what you're trying to represent. This is this power of suggestion that's really important. One of the advantages that I find in drawing on location is the ability to remember where you were at a certain point in time. And these series of slides shows how the effect of it. This is upper right, torrential rain that we had to walk through after visiting the National Archaeological Museum in Naples. And the train station was 1.8 kilometers away. We had to walk through the torrential rain to get to the station, and this is evidence of that. Here's another example. This is downtown Dallas. Went out early one morning. It was 43 degrees Fahrenheit, 6 degrees centigrade. It was so cold that I could barely stand and to draw this view. And the opposite end of the spectrum, in a very hot, humid day in Atlanta, you can sort of see where beads of sweat drop down on the page as I was drawing the High Museum by Richard Meyer. And finally, here's another example from San Gimignano, where the bird dropping, you can see the bird dropping on the stairs. These are all examples of how I could remember where I was when I see this evidence on the page. Even if there are no evidence of rain or sweat, when you do a drawing like this and you spend half an hour or 45 minutes on a view, you can't help but remember the time of day, the season of the year, how you felt, what it felt like to be in a certain place. And now I want to turn to just a few thoughts on design media. So on the left, I've been talking about drawing from observation, seeing the present, and its important role in noticing the environments in which we live, work, and play. I think it's an important skill and it's an important tool for designers. But in the design process, of course, we're also drawing from the imagine, where we're trying to imagine a future, and I want to look at how a drawing plays into that. The drawing from the imagination, drawing from observation are really two sides of the same coin. Of course, in the design process, when you draw the future, there are certain phases we're familiar with. The first is ideation, exploring ideas. You can do this on a computer, but certainly doing it by hand is a fairly easy way to explore possibilities at this stage. And the more possibilities you explore at this stage, the richer the opportunities to explore. I just remember seeing a video by Stephen Hall where he talks about doing his watercolor sketches to stimulate the imagination. And it's really talking about his mind and a hand working together to explore ideas. And of course, the next stage is developing the ideas, identifying strengths, exploring weaknesses, and so on. And this stage, we're still working pretty freely, back and forth, to aid in identifying the areas that we want to develop further. Refinement, this is where I think more and more we're getting into the use of digital technology to refine the ideas working in 3 dimensions. And finally, of course, is the persuasion. I like to use the word persuasion because at this stage, you're trying to persuade your peers, your clients, a jury of your peers, colleagues, of the worth of your proposal. And more now, we're beginning to see the very sophisticated use of digital technologies. But to develop design ideas, we have to be able to externalize them, not only so that you can work on them yourself, but you can also communicate them to others. And the means we have, of course, is typically hand drawings. We have physical models. And increasingly, we have digital models. And of course, we have digital graphics. These are all ways to externalize your ideas, and we need to be familiar with all of these and what their strengths and weaknesses are. So physical media, I'm talking about thinking with a pen or pencil on paper, making physical models. With digital media, I'm talking about thinking with a computer and using hybrid models. So now, of course, I went to school using the T-square and a parallel rule before the age of computers. So in those days, of course, we used two-dimensional orthographic projections, plans, sections, elevations to develop ideas. Today, because of the computer and the programs that are available to us, we typically begin with 3D perspective views. So drawing by hand with a T-square parallel rule, you're really going from the conceptual to the perceptual. I remember you had to develop the plan sections, elevations first before you began to construct the perspective views. Today, with the computer, you work from the perceptual to the conceptual. So you develop models in 3 dimensions, and then the program can assist you in cutting plans and sections. So it's really the reverse of what we used to do. So when you were drawing by hand 30, 40 years ago, time was the problem because it took a long time to develop these drawings, and therefore you had to plan your process out very carefully because it was very difficult to go back and redo drawings. Now the problem today is because the computer can develop so many possibilities so quickly, it's really more a matter of discipline, having the discipline to evaluate all of the possibilities and begin to focus. So now a quick comparison of physical and digital models. Physical models obviously are built with materials, physical materials, and digital models are really, think about it, are insubstantial. In other words, they appear on the screen, but there's no substance to them. And when you build physical models, you're really working with the hand. Even when you fabricate the parts with the digital tools that we have available, you still assemble many of these materials by hand. And if you're actually working with materials, you can sense the grain and plasticity of the materials you're dealing with. But on the computer, you're really manipulating algorithms. It's very abstract. So you're handling materials on the one hand, and you're naming them on the other. And of course, the difficulty of building physical models makes them singular. You may build 1 or 2 of them as working models, and with the digital realm, you can do multiple models very quickly, which can be an advantage. So these are all various modes of representation. I'm not talking simply about whether they're plan sections, elevations, but I'm also thinking about the physical media versus digital media. These are all representations of the Mount Stastaccio in Rome. Upper left, you can see a figure ground. Notice how the mount is cut through, so showing the void within the mount. Simply looking at the solid void of the spaces, buildings, and the streets, and so on. In the upper middle, you see more of a contour version of the mount with the surrounding context. On the right, you see a collage of that same site using physical materials and layering. which reminds you more of the physical nature of the topography. And on the lower left, similar to the upper middle, notice the use of contours to convey the topography, which requires that you understand the convention of contour lines. These are all different ways of seeing and thinking about the subject matter, but no one way of no one way of representing Mount Pistachio can convey everything about that place. We've already addressed the idea of the experiential versus the objective view. One conveys feeling, and the other one is measurable. And I think you need both when you're studying design ideas. And so the modes, I'm sorry, that skipped forward. What I was going to say is that no single mode of representation reveals everything about a subject matter, because every mode will conceal as much as it reveals. So we need to have a range of modes of representation to study an idea. And to do that, you need to develop fluency. Whether you're drawing by hand, working on a computer, fluency means that you can work with the tool without thinking about how do I do this, how do I do that. You're really more concerned with what you're thinking as opposed to drawing a line, or which key do I press, or which command do I use. Fluency means you're more directly connected with the ideas you're trying to think about. And of course, practice is the first means of developing fluency. And in this case, I think the tendency is if you're drawing, you know how to draw by hand well, you tend to stay with that. Or if you really work with computers well, you tend to stay with that. I think the idea is that it's better practice to work with tools that you're not familiar with so that you have a more broad-based palette to work with. And when you do that, you have to develop a sense of, for these different design tasks, what the appropriate tool might be. So in the end, I think you have to be comfortable with both the hand and the machine if possible, rather than restricting yourself to only one way of doing things. So I want to return to the fact that drawing is a language, and we have to be able to read drawings, not just write drawings, so that we can communicate with them adequately. So oftentimes we tend to think about how do I do a drawing, but we forget about how to read a drawing. And together, if we can read and write drawings, develop the visual language that designers use, then the better we will be able to communicate with them. So I want to conclude by thanking you for the time. I hope as I was able to provide you with some insights. And I don't know how you want to handle questions or answers, but I'm certainly willing to spend some time thinking about answering whatever questions you might have.
Oh, that's excellent to hear. Well, you already said it, but now we'll keep going with, we'll continue with the question time. So we're already seeing many questions in the comment section. So I'll start with one from Marcela Cervantes, and she says, do you think that hand drawing has more magic than computer drawing?
Well, they both have advantages. The hand drawing has a personality, has an authorship, particularly if you're doing freehand drawing. The authorship is very evident. With digital drawings, authorship is more difficult to discern because the programs have such a strong hold of how things appear. You can develop a style with digital drawings, but it's harder to read, I think. So, you know, I think freehand drawing has this role, drawing on location, thinking out problems on paper, but the digital tools also have a role as well. I think you have to be able to do work with digital technology today.
So we hope that answer is very well answered. Well, many people from all over Latin America want to greet you. People from Spain, from the Dominican Republic, from Colombia, etc., etc. Let's remind our audience that you can and may write your questions in the comment section, please, and we're reading you. There's a question from Benjamin Escalona, and he says, if you have any preferred material to draw and therefore to transmit your ideas.
These are personal preferences, of course, but I like drawing with a fountain pen on paper with real ink that smears. So, because I like the feel of a pen, of a nib on paper. For me, drawing is tactile. I like to be able to feel the surface that I'm drawing on. I draw on the iPad as well, but it's like drawing on glass. So I still like the tactile feel of paper, real paper and ink.
Perfect. Carla Basto is asking if you believe that people born with the ability of drawing, or you can develop it during your lifetime.
I've been teaching a long time. I have been teaching a long time, and I think, in my experience, very, 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 very few people cannot learn to draw. I think you're not born with it. You can learn it. Some people, it may take more time than others, but in my experience, everyone can learn it to varying degrees, of course. And it takes practice. You have to enjoy it, and it takes practice and practice and practice to be able to use it well. The interesting thing is you're not learning how to draw like someone else. You're really learning how to draw what you yourself experience. And I've said it many times, learning to draw is literally learning how to see. And the drawing part, the actual drawing of a line, is not that important. It's what that line represents, and that comes with how you experience it and how you see the environment.
Okay. Another question from Pedro Palomino. What do you think will be the impact on the current and future architectural design style as a consequence of the impulse of digital drawing?
Well, you've seen it already. I mean, the ability of the computer to calculate forms and figure out the structural abilities of certain forms, and further to be able to fabricate those forms has given rise to Frank Gehry's buildings, Zaha Hadid's buildings. Those forms would not have been possible, or would have been very difficult to do by hand. So you can sort of see that ability of the computer to develop these fantastic forms, and so that's driven some of that architecture. Now, I would say majority of buildings still deal with orthogonal forms, vast majority of them anyway. So yeah, it's an interesting time because I guess it's a matter of not if you can do something, because now you can do pretty much anything you want to. Now it's more a question of should you do it, not can you. So yeah, the digital technology has given rise to so many possibilities.
And we can agree on that, absolutely. People actually in the comment sections are asking if you can draw like live now. That's what people are asking.
I can show you. I'll show you. I'll try to show you something. Okay.
That's
here.
excellent. That's awesome.
Okay, let me see if I can show you. Now, this is a drawing I did in Boston of the Trinity Church. And I did it on the iPad. And this is replaying the steps I took. So you can sort of see how I developed the basic facade, horizon line, division. Because it's symmetrical, notice I'll follow symmetry. And what I'm doing is simply blocking out, and I'm drawing with a stylus, so it's you sort of see the steps there. Notice that I'm not doing a lot of detail. I'm just blocking out the basic form, and immediately I'm going to the foreground, the background, to just develop the whole page. Now, as I'm going, now I'm beginning to develop the detail on the building itself. So, yeah, there. And finally, now I'm developing the values to push spaces back. So see the process the process I try to develop is a structure, blocking out the basic forms, then detail, and then tonal values. So the reason I use the iPad is I can actually save this as a video and replay it back.
Sure. Meanwhile, there are a few more questions. I don't know if we got time.
Okay.
Sure. From YouTube, the user Skies and Rainforest, she says, Mr. Ching, it is such an honor to meet you through these mediums. We can still appreciate your simplicity to see beauty and expressing it through architectural drawing. so as your humbleness. And then she asked, and how wise you are. Is there anything you would like to say to the aspiring students of architecture in South America?
Well, first of all, I want to say that it's been a great privilege and honor to be able to visit Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, and I really appreciate it. I still remember in Argentina, particularly seeing, can't do this very well, but I can see, I'm not drawing. I was struck by this view of the world.
Okay.
So yeah, and then I remember seeing the shadows fall on the south side of buildings. So it was difficult for me. I couldn't find my way around places because I was following the sun the wrong way. I admire the history. I admire. I think South America has the way it embraced modernism. I'm encouraged by that. I think I saw so many good things happening. I think to embrace the culture, embrace the beautiful environment, and embrace its history. Those are things that are important. The basics, yeah, you can learn the basics, but going beyond that is to think about the culture and the place and the history.
Thank you for those words. It is very admirable. Thank you. Well, I think we're quite on time. Would you like to share something else with us?
Not particularly. I mean, it's easier for me to respond to certain issues. I think if I'm talking to primarily faculty, that's I think because it's been, so I've seen so many changes in the teaching environment from 40, 50 years ago. And it's difficult to keep up with these changes, and I think it's meetings like this that help you see what's going on in other places, and to be able to keep up with the challenges, especially now. I couldn't imagine doing much more of this online. It's really a challenging time. So I admire. I've always enjoyed teaching, and so I always admire people that do teach. It's a challenging but satisfying profession.
We see and we appreciated this awesome and incredible presentation of yours. So to finish with this an amazing presentation, we really want to thank you for this. There were hundreds of people watching us through Zoom, YouTube, and our official channels. And how interesting and incredible it is, the power of hand drawing. So to finish this, we would like to thank you all people from all corners of Latin America. We had people from Brazil, people from Argentina, Colombia, the Dominican Republic, Mexico, and so on. So thank you so much, audience. Thank you so very much, Professor Ching. This has been amazing for us, and I hope sometime you can come here to Chile and have some fun here in South America. We really appreciate it.
I would love to. Thank
your
you.
presentation. You're welcome to come whenever you want, that's for sure.
Thank you.
So thank you, everybody. This is the end of our presentation, the presentation of Francis Ching. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bueno, solo queda dar las palabras de nuestros profesores y de nuestros encargados, profesor Roberto, profesor Pedro, si quisieran dar algunas palabras para finalizar esta gran presentación del profesor y maestro Francis Ching, que fue una increíble jornada con nuestros invitados y con todas las personas que nos están viendo alrededor de Latinoamérica.
Así es, Felipe. Yo creo que ha sido un día maravilloso tener por primera vez en forma virtual al profesor Ching en Chile, quien nunca ha estado físicamente, ha parado en Santiago nomás cuando fue a Argentina, pero
en el aeropuerto.
Eso no es estar en Chile, estar en un aeropuerto. Yo rescato lo que el profesor Ching enfatizó, el dibujo como una herramienta del desarrollo sensorial en su modelo pedagógico. Él ha dedicado su vida a escribir y a dibujar, como lo hemos visto hoy. Y él ama la enseñanza, como bien lo acaba de decir, la enseñanza de la arquitectura. Por lo tanto, cada uno verá cómo conecta este mundo sensorial que tenemos cada uno con el medio y cómo transportarlo a un croquis o a un dibujo digital o a un dibujo análogo. Darle las gracias nuevamente a nuestro profesor Ching por su gran contribución a la enseñanza de la arquitectura. Estoy muy motivado realmente por este encuentro, que gran parte lo han hecho los estudiantes. Felipe, Catherine, Fresley, y el apoyo de nuestra arquitecta, que ha sido la traductora, ¿no es cierto?, Camila Witching, realmente brillante. Todo de la cantera de la Universidad de Concepción. Los felicito, estudiantes, porque este es su fiesta. Este quinto encuentro es la fiesta de los estudiantes de Latinoamérica. Solamente decir, estamos tratando de cumplir al máximo lo programado en este quinto encuentro. Mañana tenemos la visita de otro docente destacado, pero ahora desde Perú, Luis Longi, quien nos va a encantar con su mirada de docente y de arquitecto en la vida profesional. Por lo tanto, los invitamos mañana a conectarse nuevamente en este quinto encuentro, donde partiremos con la recepción de antesala a las 9:45 hora chilena, para partir con la recepción de Luis Longi a las 10 de la mañana hora chilena. Los esperamos, docentes, estudiantes. Es mi mirada de alegría. La verdad que aún no despierto si esto es un sueño o es una realidad lo que ocurre en este preciso instante de este día maravilloso. Gracias. Y es cuanto puedo decir por el día de hoy. A todos ustedes ha sido un día realmente lleno de adrenalina. Gracias, Felipe. Gracias, profesores, por su apoyo.
Gracias a usted. Y a la audiencia que aún está conectada, había muchas más preguntas que nos querían hacer para el profesor Ching. Da muchos saludos y mucha gratitud acerca de la organización del evento. Muchas gracias a ustedes también por estar presentes, absolutamente. Nosotros detrás queremos que este quinto encuentro sea lo mejor posible. Y muchas preguntas quedaron sin contestar y precisamente por la falta de tiempo, pero esperamos y escogimos las que mejor pueden calzar para la ocasión. Pero muchas gracias por la atención de todas las personas.
También, Felipe, agradecer a las mesas de trabajo, ¿ya? Que por las redes, los que han podido participar y acceder a las conversaciones, lo han encontrado muy interesante lo que se ha debatido, ¿ya? Y es un material que ya es de consulta. Entonces, agradecer a cada una de las 4 mesas su dedicación y su trabajo con tanto cariño expuesto para toda Latinoamérica y desde Guadalajara hasta Argentina. Muchas gracias, Felipe, por su conducción.
Sí, y yo
Gracias
quisiera
a
agregar
todos.
y resaltar algo que no hemos dicho. Este congreso es gratis. Primera vez de un desafío importante de tener invitados internacionales como de la talla de Francis Ching, donde nos dan su trabajo, su tiempo gratis. Así que es valioso, es un cambio espiritual, yo diría, en la docencia, en la enseñanza. Y eso es lo que quería resaltar, profesores, por este evento tan hermoso que estamos realizando. Y si cometemos errores, pedimos disculpas, compañeros y docentes de Latinoamérica. Estamos experimentando. Yo primera vez que estoy en este ambiente virtual y pido las disculpas, la dispensa, y si hay algún error, tener la flexibilidad para comprender que está hecho con el mejor cariño de todo este equipo de organización. Bueno, profesores, demos por concluida esta jornada maravillosa. Nosotros seguiremos trabajando para todos ustedes, haremos una jornada de reflexión para aprender y poder mejorar nuestra experiencia y hacerla mejor mañana. Un abrazo fraternos para todos ustedes. Gracias, Felipe. Gracias, profesor Orellana, Catherine, Camila. Gracias
Nos
por
vemos
todo.
mañana.
Adiós.
Chao, nos vemos mañana.